Okay. I'm Bill Knowles, and sorry, I've been to Pepperdine, but I haven't been to acting school there. So I don't know if I can do that same acting. Have a little comedy club, maybe we can do that.
We should start one. Let's go.
Yes. Well, maybe that's a good use of our team. So we're going to talk about, right now, we're going to talk about the lead mentor role. And as Cynthia was saying, we really need lead mentors. We have to have people do this. It can't be one or two people always taking on all of the team leads. And that involves a little bit of work for the team. So does being on the team. Don't say, oh, I'll be on the team, but I'll never be a mentor because I don't have to do any work. Yes, you do. Even as a mentor on the team, there's a lot to be done. And it might be most of the work because you are probably the expert in the areas where the venture needs you. You're going to bring that to the table. So it's going to be important for you to have that. But the lead mentor has some responsibilities. You can see the first bullet up here. It talks about primary interface. Well, you do that by doing these other bullets. And if you want to do that one, all you do is execute these things. Coordinate all of these types of things that are on here. Priorities, very high focus on that item. Out of everything that's on there, always getting into the priorities. And how do you determine, well, what is that next priority for our team? I'm the lead, I've got to make sure that the person who is the entrepreneur understands this too. Maybe if they're really good at this, maybe they'll come up with the ideas because they have been paying attention, they have been listening, and they're evaluating this. So you got to come up with those. Those priorities are associated to the strategy. If you want to go back one step behind, how do I get to that? Well, where are you in that strategy? So that says that a strategy is really important for this group of people who are in the venture. The entrepreneur is kind of the head person there, whatever they come up with the ideas, they're running it. The venture is everybody that's associated to it. That venture has to have an understanding, a like understanding between each individual of what is that strategy that's on the table. And that helps set your priorities because you know what step you're in, where you're going next. Really makes a big difference. Contact with this maintaining contact doesn't mean that just the lead does that. That might be somebody else dealing with it, but the lead's always on board. The lead knows this is happening. They're not removed from it. So maybe there's some particular person on the mentor team is finance background, and there's some big need for finance right now. So that person who is the financial expert that's on that team will probably be doing a lot of the work, but the lead knows where that's going. And this last bullet down in here, provide updates. We will come back into our monthly meetings. I'll be coming up here and introducing it. Person from Pepperdine will come up, do a little act, get everybody laughing, and then we get into the work of the meeting. So we'll do this. But when you're doing this down here and the updates for me, there probably is going to have to be, on our part, we talked about this, we haven't done it, some kind of a template that we're going to have. Because we don't want every team coming and doing their own thing. We'll never know, well, how do I judge that versus where we are? They're talking about 100% different things that I'm talking about as a lead mentor. So we'll have to have certain kind of categories that we want to make sure we hit as a group. That'll come along. Oh, ready to be lead mentors now? And believe me, you don't have to go to Pepperdine just to do this. You do it back. Yeah. I use Pepperdine. I've been there. I went to an Olympic event out there one time, and that was
long before I was there. No, not actually.
Well, 84 Olympics were out there in LA, so I was working for IBM and we ran the Olympics, so I had to go to all the event places. Pepperdine was a home.
Water polo.
Yeah, the water polo. You could go there and watch people try to drown other people by pushing down. And they never listened to those other people until there was competition. Important chart because it kind of sets up the attitude that's existing between these groups now. So you have the mentor team here on the left, and they're saying, okay, if I bring all these little things to the table, and the mentees are coming over here, and they have this idea, and maybe that's the entrepreneur that's in the venture, but everybody in that venture that's associated with that entrepreneur needs to have that same understanding, especially when we get to strategy that I mentioned earlier. If you come together and you have these discussions and you do a lot of the things Cynthia was just talking about listening and building things, you're probably going to start out doing some things in here about building trust pretty fast. And that's why we spent quite a bit of time just on trust, because it's important. If you can do this trust thing and you do active listening, that's a big part of building it, some of these other things are going to take place. There's going to be a respect and enthusiasm that's going to start to grow on that team. So that little list in the middle kind of grows in a certain direction, a certain way. It starts with the first couple things, respect and enthusiasm about it, or active listening and respect, and then that kind of makes these other things work. This is a great thing to kind of evaluate whether or not you're going in the right direction. It's always the wrong way. The other way here. So restaging is a term, I don't know if you heard that, but that's what you're going to have to do. And I have a chart coming up right after this that's going to show you where that goes. It's what stage is this venture in when we start working with them. So in your first meeting as a group, the lead mentor and the mentors that are there kind of all have to evaluate, well, what stage is this really in? Because there's a vetting process that's going to be done before we ever touch this group. And that vetting process is going to put them in a stage. We're going to have and they have stage 1, 2, 3. We'll take a look at that in the next chart. But that's something in the first meeting you have to really evaluate. And you probably have to keep your eye on it because it doesn't stay steady. If they're progressing, they're going to be moving through those stages. If something happens to them, you have to remember they can go backwards. It's not a one-way street. They actually could go backwards in their staging. And that might even happen between the vetting process and when the mentor team first sits down. Could. Probably not, but could. So just always understand, okay, where are they? And we'll take a look at that stage thing coming right up. I do want to mention SMART goals. It's something that's important for this whole thing, and Cynthia's going to come right up and do some charts on that after another chart for me. And having consensus around where you're going to go as a group. Again, that's tied back to what are the priorities, and what are the priorities are tied to is strategy. That's the way forward. Now, the staging group. The lines in between these stages, when you're talking about level 1, 2, and 3, those are the high level things, and then there are all these stages in between each. And if you're in this stage 1 through 3, you're probably here with this concept in the level 1. But these lines between level 1 and level 3, they're a little bit flexible, and they are not one way. So sometimes you will say, well, I think they're in this level 2, but sometimes I get the feeling like maybe they've moved over here. Yeah, you don't know for sure, but if you do enough work with them and you're really having conversations as a mentor team after each of the meetings, you need to sit and debrief. And if you're doing those kinds of things, you're going to probably have to make up your mind, where have they been, are we restaging these folks? That's that term. Where are they? Back in here somewhere, it's not on here, we got vision on here, but if this venture has any idea around business management, I'm not talking about the business plan, this is over in here, I'm talking about the overall strategy, a business strategy. It's got elements like the mission statement, strategic goals, tactical goals, and actions. They're all like in a triangle. Mission's up here, one little statement. Strategic goals, you have a few of those. They're really high level. Tactical goals, there's a lot more of them. Those are the things that you do to implement the strategic goals. And then down at the bottom of that pyramid, there's hundreds of these. There's actions that venture has to take to make their business work. Those actions. Actions are very much the same as if you're doing some kind of management around process. Process management, it's like all the steps in a process. It takes to get from the input of something to the output being done. Questions on that? There's a lot of concepts there. It usually takes me about one full day to explain a strategy to a business unit. We just did it in about 30 seconds. So maybe that's something you'll remember. So when you get this implemented, and you start to see that strategy's there, maybe they are in here. Maybe they have an idea where they're going. Maybe that business strategy is not solid in that company's mind, in that venture's mind, until out in here somewhere. But just remember that then, because that kind of holds them here. They can't make a lot of priority decisions until they do understand that strategy. And the strategy for a startup is not like the strategy for a major corporation. Major corporation strategies are pretty well set. They know the market, they know their business, they know the culture that they work in, they know where they're going, they know they have other companies even evaluating the marketplace out there. So they have a great idea where their strategy is. It's pretty solid, it doesn't change every year. You don't go back and change your mission statements anyway. It's the high level parts of the strategy, strategic goals, mission, pretty steady. The actions are changing all the time, what it takes to get things done. All the work at a company is done at the bottom of that pyramid with actions. So you keep your eye on it and see where they are. Questions on this? This is a great way to take an idea of where is this venture? And are they progressing? Have we seen them as a mentoring team, as we're doing our debrief meetings, have we seen progress? Or have we seen them sometimes come backwards a little because something happened to their company? Something happened to one of their resources, their product. When you're starting to get out in here, you got to be prototyping. And maybe you do that early on. If you're teaching somebody design thinking innovation, you prototype the first time you get together if you can. And lots of prototypes for a product or service are simply a flip chart. You draw out, where's this thing going? What are the elements of it? You just write them down because you can't build it yet. A drug company does that all the time. They have elements and they talk about effects of things and they put them down on pieces of paper before they start building anything.
I think one of the issues with being in level 1 is stage 1, 2, and 3 are almost a circular process. Because when you get to confirming the value proposition, you find out, oh, we have a better value proposition in a different direction, and you kind of have to go back in a little bit of a circle between stage 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult for some people who might be better operationally in the conceptual stage. So when we have our team set up, there's operations people and strategy people.
Right in here.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's one thing to remember in the level 1 conceptual
Yep.
stage is it's really circular. It
It
goes
can,
back
it
and
can
forth.
usually be. That's what I'm saying. This is not a one-way
Yeah.
street. And these lines between things are not really solid. Once you cross that line, you get over into here, or you cross this line, that doesn't mean you're gonna stay there. That line's not necessarily a solid thing. You might just kind of get pushed back against it, and like your point, come back in here.
Yeah.
And as you go out and you start testing that first product or your service or your product, everything in the world is a service or a product. When you get it out to a customer, somebody who's identified as your customer, and that might not be the right person either. You got to make sure who is the customer and have we identified as the venture, have they identified who's the real customer? That sends you in that circle because it sends you back a bit. Sometimes it's not working the way you thought it would work. Therefore, you have that. It's a great point. Thank you. Not one way.
So, will copies of all the slides be available? I don't know who to ask that.
You're looking for this staging, this
All of the
Okay.
slides.
little slide.
I
They
think-
may be posted.
Yes,
I
yes.
think
In fact, we're going to be posting all of this on the website.
Okay.
Okay.
And the venture.
So the copy of slides will be available for everybody.
Yes.
And the staging, I think Dan's going to talk about a repository for some documents, and one of the things that we will have available in that repository is some
Correct.
business guidance.
Tools, things where you can find us. The discussion around this has to be fairly open as a mentoring team, by the way. Because different people at that table, your team of 3 people, whatever number it is, are going to see things a little bit differently. So you have to have that open-ended discussion about where they are and why do you think they're there. And a lot of that is that and statement that Cynthia was talking about. You want to listen to what those people are saying and you say, and they did this and that. You don't want to say, no, that's wrong. I've been through this before. You're incorrect. That's not the listening process. So as a mentoring team, be careful to do the same thing you'd be doing if the venture's in the room. You're listening, you're expanding, you're trying to make a decision on where you're going. It takes a lot of cooperation on that mentoring team. But eventually, after you start talking about it, you start to make a decision, okay, where have we restaged them? Maybe we didn't have to. They were here when we started, they're still here. We haven't gotten them that way yet. Questions? Any more questions? Thank you very much, Susan. But copies, it's important to know you're going to get copies of these things.
Well, it's a little bit off topic, but how do you protect the entrepreneur from confidentiality in terms of, non-competes and things like that, so that none of the mentors run and take the ideas and concepts?
Yeah.
How do you protect the entrepreneurs?
I will tell you the legal aspect of it. Right away, she knows this, yeah. And that's an important thing.
Yeah.
We are. We are bound to that. I mean, we are not, it's kind of a legal thing. I think even, are there agreements?
We have a whole segment on the confidentiality, so we will get to that. I don't want to disrupt our flow here because we're on a pretty tight time frame, but that's a very good point, and it's something that all of the entrepreneurial ecosystem support organizations struggle with, because we don't want to put you as mentors into any kind of difficult position, because you hear a lot of ideas, and oftentimes entrepreneurs will believe that the idea that they're bringing to you or discussing is completely unique and original, and you may already have had many experiences that are similar. So it's a balance, because of course we want to protect our entrepreneurs. At the same time, we want to protect our mentors and people that are volunteering their time to give guidance that, they've already seen and heard a lot, they've read a lot of business plans and have a lot of knowledge already that is not coming to them from the individual entrepreneur.
Any other questions? Yeah, Bruce?
From a mentee's position,
Yeah.
okay? It's important for the mentor to realize that you're conveying your concept as to how this entire idea works, okay? The mentee's idea. As the mentee goes through this on an ongoing basis, and he or she does outside research and what have you, what comes to the surface very, very quickly is that these are opinions. Opinions how venture capitalists think. And then when you talk to an actual venture capitalist, you find out that the information you've been getting isn't quite right, because it's another interpretation. So if you haven't, as a mentor, if you haven't been a mentee, you've got to keep that in mind, because in the final analysis, the mentee, yours truly, has to decide what information he's going to accept, and he has to run his own race.
That's an excellent point. They have to make that decision. Exactly. Raise your hand if you have started a business from scratch. Yeah, or been involved in a startup from scratch. Okay, excellent. That's great news.
Yeah, I
Charles.
think another point along with what he's saying is, when you start a business, and I've always been in technology, okay, you start an idea with something, and right now I'm involved in digital mobile marketing, and I've been involved in about 4 years now, and we've probably made 4 major turns, because times change, technology changes, social media changes, and so whatever your business is, even if you got the perfect mentor initially, 6, 12 months, the world could have changed, the market could have changed. You got to make a little pivot. You got to add this. You got competition who's doing something or another. So it's almost constantly changing, and
That agility, right, is super important.
yeah.
Has anybody who's on it, just curious, do you want to add something, or you're?
Yeah, I'm going to go sit down.
Okay.
Remember when I was talking about strategy? I made that point that the strategy in a big corporation is very different than these strategies. It's the same point that you're making. The strategy that you're going to go and see here, and if you're from a big corporation and you have a background and you haven't worked with these little startups, you're going to find out everything here is very different than you worked on, including that need for finance, including the needs for many things. It's very different than if you come walking out the door from a large corporation. So always keep that in mind. What's my background? Versus what's this group going through right now that I'm working with as the venture?
So that's a dichotomy between agility and structure. So if you want to think metacognitively, metacognitively about that, if I can say that word. You think agility, structure, right? And when you are starting out with something, that agility, that flexibility, that sort of openness to whatever has got to be there. But at some point, you got to start a move toward having some standard procedures for things, and it's that balance. But keeping that entrepreneur in a place of, hey, stay open. Might need to change is a very hard thing to do with some certain personalities, particularly. What were you going to say?
I think Bruce's point is well taken. And the way that translates for me is really about presenting options.
Good,
As
good, yes.
opposed
As a
Here's what
facilitator.
I've done and here's what I suggest you do.
Right.
It's really, hey, here's 4 options. Because at the end of the day, the mentee's the one that has to live with reality.
Yeah, they have to make that decision. That's what I think Bruce is really saying. And also, what I like about what Bruce brings to that perspective, and he said this a lot, but I want to kind of crystallize it for us, is having mentors who have expertise but aren't so tied to their opinions that they have to have their way, right? That's really what we're trying to kind of create and acculturate all of our mentors to have that expectation of themselves. Yes, you bring awesome expertise to the table. One of the things you have to do, though, and I'm a big Stephen Covey devotee. He wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders, and those concepts have stood the test of time. And one of the things that number one that an effective leader does anybody remember number 1 before I say it? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That means you listen before you talk. So I know that it's so important for you to establish your expertise and say, oh, this is where I came from, and this is all the stuff that I've done, and that's awesome and great. But if you don't have trust and respect are sort of 2 sides of one coin, right? You can have some respect for someone, but you might not necessarily flip it over and have trust in them. You want to establish the trust first. Okay, you can build the respect on that, and as you go, you can say, this is my background, this is what I've done, all right, and so you build on the trust. But if you come in with, boom, respect, you must respect me because I have done all these awesome things, you can intimidate, you can create an environment where your word is law, and you might not, what we're trying to do is equip and empower, not dictate, right? So it's a different sort of approach, and it may not be what has worked for you necessarily in leading large organizations in the past, so it requires some flexibility. Bob?
Might be useful. One thing, actually, this would be my first time formally trying to be in like a mentor group, and they've always done it informally, and people just come up to you on the spot. But I was trying to take the attitude, and somewhat from my personality and what was a management style, was like my friends in psychology do. They say they can't tell you how to solve they'll help you get to figure out how you want to do it. I think that's what Bruce is coming to, with some things, do it your way. And then for those of us that come, there's those management styles, you've probably heard about Stephen Covey and all, but the consultative types,
Yes, coaching,
the younger George
consulting.
Bush was that way. You take in a lot of expertise, but you're going to do it your way. Eventually, you have to understand there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah, and it's okay. I mean, that either way. But our job, the mandate that you've been given, and you will be expected to sort of, if you continue to participate in this process, is to facilitate, to equip, to coach. You'll have different approaches to that because everyone's different. But our objective is to give the entrepreneur all the help we can so that they can launch. But they are going to have to do it, and that's what Bruce is. One of the salient points I think that Bruce makes is he had to make that decision. And sometimes when he gets new information, it conflicts. The mentors kind of have to help the mentee sort of walk through that and adjust and go, okay, well, this is the new information. Maybe we needed to, include that in our analysis. Yeah, Bruce.
Which is the primary reason why as mentors, we should not be meeting privately, per se, in the early stages. Okay, because the mentee gets whipsawed. You say one thing, and all of a sudden you go travel down that particular road, and another mentor at a meeting looks at you, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Why'd you go in that direction?
Yeah,
and you can't sit there and say, well, because he told me.
That's definitely in those objectives, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit later, Paul. I mean, Phil.
Along that line, just curious whether it's something that might be helpful, since every mentor team could be potentially different mentors.
Yes.
is it probably advisable to avoid whiplash and whipsawing and all that other stuff, that the mentors get together before talking to the mentee and establish a process amongst themselves and an understanding of how they might want to work?
Dan's going to talk about that later.
Sorry, Dan.
I have a 10 a.m. class to teach, so I got to run over to UNCW. So I'm going to want to get through at least my portion of it. So I'm going to ask you to table questions and comments until we get to the Q&A session, okay? And I hate to push it like that, but we got to get going. So SMART goals. Anybody here not familiar with SMART goals? I am not going to reteach this because I think most of you know what this means. But one of the things that I have found is that we often know what we should be doing and we don't do it. So, which is, Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. If you are interested in why we do silly things like that, it's because we have two brains. One is the limbic system, the other is our prefrontal cortex, and they want different things. And so what happens is we get into a meeting and we start going, okay, let's make some goals for you. And you have this great, momentum going, and then you never stop to evaluate, okay, wait, are our goals SMART? So this will be available in our documents in our repository to sort of remind you, evaluate the goals that you're coming up with your mentee. Make sure that they're specific. Make sure that they're measurable, okay? You've got to have some way of saying, have we attained this thing? Make sure that they're actionable. Is it some pie in the sky thing? If you have world peace on your list of goals, I'm sorry. I love that too. I drink to it every week, but I don't see it happening in any of these teams. So make sure that you can take action based on these goals and that it's realistic and that it's time-bound. Time-bound, I've seen it written both ways, but in other words, you've got some sort of, okay, let's check in on this goal and see when we can accomplish it. How far out is this goal? You've got to have some sort of time frame on it, okay? Just make sure that you don't forget what you already know about how goals should be structured. All right, so now we're going to do something fun, because I'm into that. And I'm going to tell you about a venture. And then in your pairs, you're going to stage this venture, okay? So I'm not, you might want to take notes because I'm not going to say this twice. All right. A student of mine came to the vetting committee with an idea. We'll call him Kirk. And Kirk has an idea that he wants to start a business that is focused on giving back to the environment. So he wants to sell products on eBay and on Amazon, so have a digital footprint, but also have physical locations, like in other locations, so not have a physical location himself, but place his products in other physical locations like boutiques and things like that. That a portion of all the profits go back to beach renourishment, beach cleanup, and ocean, a cleaner ocean. So that's his idea, and he comes to us with that. He thinks that he can charge, his idea is that he's going to charge about 25% more. He's going to buy products from China. He's already got relationships with some producers, manufacturers in China. He's going to buy these products in China where they're inexpensive. And he's going to sell them at approximately 30% markup. He thinks that 25% of that markup will be profit. He has started a business before. He started an app that he sold. So he understands how businesses work to that extent. He started an app, a company that had a similar app bought his app and sort of rolled it into their organization. He is a junior at UNCW, business major, and he's new to the area. He doesn't know anyone here, but he wants to start by establishing a presence in Wilmington for Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach, in Charleston, South Carolina for the beaches down there, and on both coasts of Florida. So he wants to start in those areas and then begin to branch out from there. All right, so that's all you really know about the staging. All you know about the venture. I want you to discuss in pairs where you would stage that venture. I'm going to back this up so you can see the staging. And then we'll discuss, okay? I'm going to give you Ooh, I'm gonna give you 5 minutes. That's a lot, so. Actually, I'm gonna give you 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That. 3 minutes, because I gotta go pretty soon, all right? Get going.